Hello, on this video I'm going to show you how to create a table, then create a primary key and a foreign key. And I'm also going to explain how the primary and foreign key work on a database table. So here I have my SSMS. I'm going to create a new database and I'm going to call this database school. And then I'm going to right click on table and new table, and I'm going to create some columns for this table. So name, maybe a phone number, and then I'm going to have a column called ID, and this is going to be of type integer. So this is a table for learning purpose only, so I'm going to have only 3 columns. But if this were a production table, you would have more columns. You'd have first name, last name, email, social security number, and everything else. But for now, this is good enough. So I have 2 columns here, and then I have the ID column. So this ID is going to be the primary key. So I'm going to right click and then set primary key. The other thing I like to do is to open the property and then set the identity column to ID. Once I do that, then the integer that gets stored in ID auto increments. So I'm going to save this table now, and I'm going to save this as a person table. Or I'm going to right click on table and I'm going to create a new table, and this table is going to be for the student. So the student is going to have a major, maybe credits, the ID, and this table is also going to have the person ID. So the ID is going to be the primary key. So I'm going to set this as a primary key again, and the same way I did with the person table, I'm going to set the identity column to ID. I'm going to save this as student. And before I close this, I'm going to uncheck the allow nulls, because the person ID is going to be my foreign key. So I'm going to do a right click now, and then I'm going to click on relationship. Then I'm going to click on add. So this relationship got created for me. And now I'm going to go right here on tables and columns specification. I'm going to click right here on these 3 dots. And this is a relationship of the primary and foreign key. So the primary key, I want it to be from the person, and I want it to be the ID. So the primary key is the person ID, and the foreign key is the student, but the person ID. So what that means here is that there will be a relationship from the student to the person table. And as soon as I finish creating this table, I'm going to come back and talk more about how the foreign and primary key work. So I'm going to click OK and close, and then save this table as well. All right, so I'm going to close the design, and I'm going to do a right click again, and I'm going to create another table. So this table will be the employee table. So salary, maybe department, and then ID, and also person ID. All right, so the ID, I'm going to set as a primary key and do exactly the same thing. Go to the property and set the identity column to be the ID. Then save. I'm going to save this as employee table. Click OK. And now I need to make the person ID a foreign key. So I'm going to uncheck the allow nulls. Then I'm going to right click and then click on relationship, and then add a relationship, and then again go right here into the tables and columns specification, click on the 3 dots. So I want the primary key to be from the person ID, and the foreign key to be on the employee person ID. I'm going to click OK, click close, and save. So now I have three tables: the employee, the person, and the students. So now I want a graphical visualization of these three tables. So I want to do a right click on views and then click on new view. And I get a error. And not only I got error, but now my SSMS is frozen, totally frozen. So let me quit. I'm gonna end the task on SSMS, and then I'm gonna open SSMS again. I'm gonna connect again. See my database, tables, they're all there. Okay, views. All right, so right click on view and new view, and it works this time. Okay, good. So I'm gonna use the shift key on my keyboard, and then I'm gonna select everything. Click on add, close. Now I want these pans to disappear, so I'm gonna right click here and then pan criteria, and then right click, pan SQL, and then right click again and then pan results. So doing so, I'm only left with these three tables. So let's understand now what the primary key and foreign key are. So I have three tables, and if you look right here, there is a connection between these two tables, and here you have a yellow key symbol. This symbol is for the primary key, and then you have a infinite loop. So what that means is this is a one-to-many relationship, and the same thing for the student table and person. So this is a one-to-many relationship. So that means you can have one record here with a unique ID, and this ID here will be placed on person ID right here on the students, and then you can create as many records as you want on the student table as long as this person ID exists right here on this table. And the same thing with the employee table. So the foreign key is a person ID here. The foreign key here is also the person ID, and the person table has no foreign key. It only has a primary key. Now the student also has a primary key, which is the ID, but this ID does not play any role on the relationship of the students and the person. The only column that plays the role on this relationship is the person ID and also the ID of the person table. And the same thing here. So on the employee table, the only column that plays a role on the relationship is the person ID column with the ID person. Now, because this is a one-to-many relationship, then the person ID here has to be of a value, so you cannot allow null on person ID, and you cannot allow null here on this person ID. So let's insert some records on this table to see how they work. So I'm going to go to person table, I'm going to right click and then edit top 200 rows. And here I'm going to add some records on this table. So the first name is going to be Mary. The phone number of Mary is some number. And then if you notice, there is a red warning sign here. And this red warning sign means this data has not been saved on the database yet. So once I press enter, the data gets saved. Now note that I did not type any number on ID. And the reason I did not type any number is because ID is set as identity, so this number is generated for me automatically. So I want to insert another row. This row is going to have Joe and some number, and then right there, I'm going to press enter. This number 2 ID got automatically generated for me. So I'm going to create one more here. The last one is going to be Jane, some phone number, enter. So now I have 3 records on my database. All right, so I'm going to go to employee now, right click, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to edit top 200 rows. So now I can add some records, but remember the person ID is a foreign key to the person. That means whatever number I place right here in the person ID must exist on the person table, because that makes into the foreign and primary key relationship. So for salary, I'm gonna put a bunch of money. Department, maybe admissions. The ID, I'm not gonna put anything. And then on the person, I must put a value. So I'm not gonna put any value, and I'm gonna press enter just to show you the error. So press enter, and now I have an error here. In other words, I must put something here. So I want to put number 1 because the ID 1 exists. And if you remember, the ID number 1 belongs to Mary. So I want to put number 1 here and press enter. So this row was saved into the employee table. I'm going to create one more record for employee. So salary, a bunch of money. Department, maybe the finance department. For ID, I'm not going to put anything. For person ID, I'm going to put number 2. Press enter, and that gets recorded there again. So I'm going to do the same thing with the student table. I'm going to go to edit top 200 rows, and then I'm going to put some value here. So major biology, credits 30. ID, I'm not going to put anything on ID. And then on person ID, I'm going to put 2. And then I'm going to have another record here. This is going to be the math, and then 45 for credits, ID, nothing, and then person ID I'm going to put. All right, so let's try to understand what's happening here. So we have the person table, and on this person table we have 3 people. Then on the employee we have 2 people. So that means person ID 1 and person ID 2 are employees of this school. So in other words, Mary and Joe are employees of this school, and they have this salary, work on this department. Now, the person ID with 2 and 3 are also students. So that means Joe is not only an employee of the school, but he's also a student. And Jane is only a student. So let's write some queries now to understand how we can combine this into the query. So I'm going to right click on person, script table as, select to new query editor. Now I want to write some code here, but this is super easy to understand. So the first query is the select. I'm just going to run as is. And when I run this query, it just shows me the records that's on the person table. Now, another way for me to do that is to put a star here, and that does exactly the same thing for me. And also, I can ignore the DBO and also the brackets. The reason I can ignore the DBO and the brackets is that person is not a what I call confusing name for Microsoft SQL. If this table name were, for example, use or from or select, then you would have to mandatorily put the square brackets right here so you would not get confused. But because this name is not confusing, then you don't have to do that. That's optional. And now I'm going to execute this query, and you can either click right here on execute or press F5 on your keyboard. I prefer pressing F5. It's just quicker for me. So now I can also select everything from students. So if I run now, I get all the values from the student and from the person, and I can do the same thing also with the employee table. So if I run this guy now, I get all the data from the 3 tables. Now, what if I want to write a query that tells me everybody who is a student? I just want to get the table from students. So if I just query the student table, I will not get the name, the address, the email, or anything. So I can't do that. So I need to write a query now that gets me both tables. Now I'm going to write a select, says select everything from student, comma, person. And now I'm going to put a where clause here. And now I'm going to use the primary key and the foreign key relationship, where person dot ID, which is the primary key, is equals the student dot person ID. So this is the foreign key and this is the primary key. Now don't forget that the way that I created this table is a one-to-many relationship. So let's see how that works. I'm gonna run this, and now I have a combination of the two tables. Now I'm gonna change the sequence here just so the name comes first. I'm gonna run again. So now I have name, phone number, then major, credits ID, and everything else. So now I have the combination of the person table plus the student table. Now I'm gonna add one more record on the student table. So I'm gonna right click and edit top 200 rows, and I'm gonna put here computer science credits 50, and I'm gonna put person ID 3 again. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because person 3 has 2 majors in this college. So the person 3 is doing math and computer science at the same time. And this here is to show you that the relationship is one-to-many. So one ID into the person table can have multiple person ID on the student table. So that's a one-to-many relationship. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to run this query again. And now I have the table and it tells me here, hey, Jane is doing math and then Jane is doing computer science. So Jane is a double major in this case. Now I'm going to do the same thing but with the employee table. Now, so employee and then employee again, and then I'm gonna run this query, and now I have Mary and Joe as an employee. Now I can run, if I want to, both queries at the same time. So instead of employee, I'm gonna have students, and the same thing here on the employee, I'm gonna have student. Now run, and then here we have the two sets of data coming from all three tables. So the first set of data, I have everybody who is an employee of the school, and then on the second sets of data, I have everybody who is a student. And I can maintain the one-to-many relationship here. I'm gonna go back to this relationship here of the foreign key and primary key allows us to have the same amount of information but in a lot smaller footprint. If we did not have this relationship here, then we would have only two tables, one table for students and one table for employee. And the student table would have to hold the major, the credits, and everything else that comes from a student, plus the name, the phone number, social security number, address, email, and everything else. And that same information would have to be stored on the employee table. And then if we have a table for suppliers, then the same information would have to be stored on the suppliers as well. And another one for maybe volunteers, another table for visiting faculty, another table for people who are not students but they came to just watch the lecture. So, in summary right here, the foreign key and primary key relationship allow us not to have repeated data in the database. And that makes our database significantly smaller. It does increase the complexity because you do have to write special queries for that and you have to maintain more columns. However, the final footprint, the final size of all this data is significantly smaller. Alright, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.